In the trembling silence of early dawn, long before there were flags, nations, or names, there were footsteps. Across the fertile valleys of the Zagros, shadowed figures hunted, gathered, settled. They didn't know they were shaping something eternal. And yet they were. In those early lives, in the marrow of their bones, in the children they buried beneath stone huts, something began. A legacy, not written in books, but imprinted in blood. The Kurds did not appear suddenly in history. They evolved slowly, across millennia, as cultures layered and languages shifted. But while their names changed, their DNA, their raw genetic signature, remained startlingly consistent. Recent genetic studies peel back the layers and expose what empires could never fully understand. The Kurdish genome is ancient, resilient, and hauntingly unique. Beneath the modern Sorani dialect or the rhythms of a daft drum in Erbil lie echoes of peoples long buried. The Lulubi, fierce mountaineers from 4,000 years ago. The Gyuri, enigmatic highlanders who once toppled Mesopotamian kings. And the Hurrians, masters of early cities, whose language has no known relative today. Their voices are gone, but their Y-chromosomal markers remain, passed quietly from father to son in an unbroken chain of inheritance. Digging even deeper, geneticists find whispers of the Halaf, one of the first known farming cultures, who settled the northern Fertile Crescent as early as 6000 BCE. These were not simple foragers. They built homes of sun-dried clay, painted pottery with hypnotic patterns, and cultivated the grains that would feed generations. They left behind no written texts, but their mitochondrial DNA flows through the veins of today's Kurdish women. What makes this genetic mosaic even more extraordinary is that it wasn't washed away by the great floods of empire. Indo-European tribes thundered in around 2000 BCE, merging with local populations. They brought new languages, yes, but even their blood was absorbed into the older matrix. Kurds today carry markers that link them to these migrants, but not as conquerors, as contributors to a greater genetic canvas, one not dominated, but shared. The result? A people who never quite fit into the neat racial boxes drawn by 19th century maps. Neither Arab nor Turk, neither wholly Iranian nor entirely Indo-European. Instead, the Kurds represent something more profound, a living fossil of ancient West Asia. They are not the remnants of a fallen people. They are the continuous pulse of one that never fell. Even modern politics, with its borderlines and erasures, has failed to bury this truth. Science now uncovers what centuries of war and division tried to forget. The Kurds were not created by conquest. They were carved by time itself, layer by layer, mutation by mutation, family by family, in one of the most genetically rich regions on Earth. This wasn't luck. It was geography, survival, and an extraordinary history of adaptation. And it's only the beginning of what their DNA can tell us. In the highlands of Sulaymaniyah, where ancient winds rustle through olive trees and stone villages cling to mountainsides, a secret has been uncovered, not in scrolls or ruins, but in blood. Scientists came looking for patterns. What they found was paradox. Among a group of 157 unrelated Kurdish men, they discovered 157 nearly unique genetic identities. In a world of increasing genetic uniformity, the Kurds were an outlier, a population that defied the expected rules of heredity. What explains this staggering genetic individuality? The answer begins with the tribes, ancient, tightly knit, and fiercely rooted in their ancestral lands. Long before nation-states, Kurdish tribes governed themselves through oral memory, custom, and blood ties. These weren't loose communities. They were genetic fortresses. Generations married within the clan, preserving both identity and mutation. It's in these familial boundaries that genetic uniqueness was born, and more importantly, protected. But this wasn't inbreeding. It was preservation. Each tribe acted like a living archive, safeguarding rare genetic signatures, passed down over hundreds, sometimes thousands of years. One clan bore the marks of haplogroup J2A, the lineage of early city builders and Neolithic agriculturalists. Another carried J1, with ancient ties to Semitic highland cultures. G2A emerged too, a clade long associated with the Caucasus and highland Iran, and scattered among them, R1A and R1B, hints of distant Indo-European migrations that left their imprint but never overtook the local genome. Each haplogroup wasn't just a set of letters. It was a coded memory of movement, of stillness, of survival. J2A is thought to have spread alongside the earliest agricultural revolutions, its carriers seeding civilizations along river valleys. In the Kurdish context, it appears again and again, pointing not to one migratory wave, but to deep-rooted continuity. It tells us that the ancestors of the Kurds were not late arrivals. They were already there when the first stones of ancient cities were laid. Even more stunning were the rare mutations and off-ladder alleles, anomalies that usually vanish in the pressure of dominant populations. Among the Sorani Kurds, these persisted. Some samples carried duplicated values in specific loci, indicating historical isolation. Others had null alleles, genetic silence, often caused by ancient deletions. Most populations erase such anomalies over time. The Kurds, through isolation and resilience, preserved them. And then, there were the microvariants. These subtle genetic flickers, often ignored in broader studies, appeared in over 15% of the Kurdish samples. At one particular locus, DYS 458, over 20 samples showed rare values. Most of these belonged to haplogroup J, once again underlining the importance of this ancient lineage in Kurdish genetics. But they also suggest something else, that evolution was happening, silently, within these tribes. Not in centuries, but in lifetimes. This isn't just a tale of numbers. It's a testimony to how a people can carry memory deeper than books. The DNA of these tribes didn't just survive invasions. It refused to conform. Even in the face of Arabization, Turkification, and forced assimilation, the Sorani Kurdish genome held on to its deep-time story. In modern laboratories, scientists look at short tandem repeats, sections of DNA that mutate rapidly and tell us about recent ancestry. In the Kurdish case, these loci don't blur into sameness. They dance. They shift. They mark individuality at a level almost unseen in other populations. It's not just that Kurds are diverse. It's that every Kurdish tribe is a world of its own. What does it mean to carry a genome that resists conformity? What does it mean when your identity isn't just spoken in a dialect, but etched in a molecule? For the Kurds, it means that even when their languages are banned, their stories forbidden, and their borders erased, their DNA remains a living declaration of who they are. In a world divided by maps, there's a question most never ask. When we talk about identity, are we speaking in terms of land or of legacy? The Kurdish genome answers with quiet defiance. It doesn't align with modern borders. It doesn't obey categories written in the aftermath of wars. Instead, it pulses along a deeper axis, one that draws a genetic map different from the one we know, one that points not westward toward Europe, but eastward, southward, toward the cradles of civilization. A recent population study, using high-resolution genetic data, placed the Sorani Kurds in a surprising position. When compared to 15 other ethnic groups across the Middle East, Central Asia, and Europe, the Kurds showed strongest genetic proximity not with the West, but with Qataris, Lebanese, Iraqis, Iranians, and Azerbaijanis. Nations shaped by deserts, mountains, and empires. Nations where continuity stretches further back than conquest. Nations that, like the Kurds, carry layers of ancestry beneath the skin. And yet, the further the compass turned toward Scandinavia, the sharper the genetic divide became. Denmark, Sweden, and Afghanistan, all distant, not just geographically, but genetically. It's not a matter of race. It's a matter of memory. Because DNA remembers more than where we live. It remembers where we came from, and more importantly, where we stayed. The Kurds did not spread across continents with empire or commerce. They endured in one of the most contested zones on Earth. And in that crucible of migration and resistance, their DNA settled into a complex equilibrium, absorbing influences, but never diluting. Their genetic profile isn't a product of isolation, but of selective retention, a stubborn inheritance that chose which pieces to keep. Multidimensional scaling, a technique that visualizes genetic distance, placed the Kurds at the heart of the West Asian cluster, forming tight genetic alignments with populations whose histories overlap theirs in war, migration, and trade. It's not merely about similar haplogroups. It's about how those haplogroups evolved within a shared cultural and geographic ecosystem, a genomic neighborhood forged over thousands of years. But the data also reveals something more intimate. The specific alleles found in Kurdish samples, especially those connected to the Y chromosome, show slow mutation rates, indicators of long-standing demographic stability. Unlike regions that experienced repeated demographic collapses or mass displacements, the Kurdish highlands maintained a continuity that's rare in human history. While the world shifted around them, their bloodlines held their course. This doesn't mean Kurdish DNA is static. On the contrary, it evolved through centuries of tribal life, local wars, and seasonal migrations. But it evolved in place, not through conquest, not through exile, but through adaptation to an unforgiving terrain. Their genes didn't wander. They rooted themselves. This rootedness is why Kurdish DNA stands apart from neighboring Turks and Arabs, despite geographic closeness. The borders say one thing, but the genes say another. They tell us that language, religion, and modern statehood cannot fully erase or reshape ancestral identity. Even if you move a people across provinces, their inheritance doesn't forget. In one striking analysis, Kurds in Iraq shared closer genetic links to populations in Lebanon and Iran than to Kurdish groups in distant diasporas. It was as if the land itself played a role in shaping the genome, encoding altitude, soil, and climate into biology. The body remembers where it breathes. What emerges from this is not a story of disconnection, but of alignment. The Kurds are not an anomaly. They are a testament to how regional identity can survive fragmentation. Their DNA isn't out of place. It's exactly where it has always belonged. So, when a Kurdish child today is born in Sulaymaniyah or Duhok, their genetic code carries not just a surname, but a map that links them to other ancient lineages across the Fertile Crescent, a map that whispers of ziggurats and fire temples, of mountains that protected and valleys that fed, a map unbroken, even when history tried to tear it apart. They live under different flags, speak in different dialects, practice different faiths, and yet, beneath the surface, there's a pulse that beats in unison. The Kurds, scattered across the broken spine of West Asia, are often described as fragmented, but the double helix tells another story. Their division is political. Their unity is biological. You can draw borders across their mountains. You can assign them to different nation-states. But what you cannot do is untangle the deep-rooted continuity flowing through their chromosomes. From the Kurmanji-speaking shepherd in eastern Turkey to the Sorani-speaking student in Sulaymaniyah, there exists a silent, genetic current that binds them generation after generation. Geneticists have studied hundreds of samples from Kurdish populations across Iraq, Turkey, Iran, and Syria. The results are clear. While languages and customs vary, the underlying DNA reveals a remarkable pattern of shared ancestry. This isn't shallow similarity. It's deep structural alignment, markers passed down for thousands of years, long before modern borders were drawn. One of the most prominent markers is J2, a haplogroup closely associated with early urban civilizations and the spread of agriculture. It appears across Kurdish communities, regardless of geography or dialect. Whether in the rugged terrain of northern Iraq or the sun-bleached plains near Diyarbakir, this genetic trace persists. Not because of recent mixing, but because of ancient commonality. J1, G2A, and R1 haplogroups also appear with frequency across different Kurdish regions. These lineages tell of shared roots that predate Islam, empire, even writing. What's striking isn't just that these haplogroups are present. It's that they echo with the same frequency across distant Kurdish zones. No matter the political climate, the bloodlines kept speaking the same language. This unity is even more remarkable when you consider the historical trauma the Kurdish people have endured. Uprisings crushed, languages suppressed, entire villages depopulated. But through all of it, the genome held steady, like a thread winding through centuries of silence and resistance. No single government could extinguish it. No single war could rewrite it. And while cultural divergence took place, as it does in all dispersed populations, the genetic data proves that no amount of separation could erase the foundational ancestry. The distance between Sorani and Kurmanji might seem wide on a map, but on a molecular level, it's barely a breath. In fact, modern studies have shown that Kurdish individuals from different regions cluster more closely with each other than with the dominant populations of the countries they live in. A Kurd from western Iran may be genetically closer to a Kurd from northern Syria than to his Persian or Arab neighbors. This isn't coincidence. It's continuity in the face of rupture. Even religion, often used to divide, has not fragmented the genome. Sunni, Shia, Yazidi, Alavi. The beliefs may differ, but the DNA remains stitched together. Faith may change across generations, but ancestry, it runs like a deep underground river, untouched by surface storms. That river also flows into the Kurdish diaspora. In Berlin, in Marseille, in Stockholm, the descendants of Kurdish refugees still carry the same genetic markers as their kin in the mountains. Displacement has not broken the chain. It has only widened its reach. This biological cohesion is more than science. It's testimony. It says, we were here together. We are still together. Even when censuses refused to name them, even when textbooks left them blank, their bodies recorded the truth. Not through words, but through inheritance. The Kurds are often called the largest nation without a state. But they possess something even more powerful than territory, unshaken lineage, a continuity that outlives constitutions, a genetic map that ignores the fault lines of empire. So the next time someone asks what makes the Kurds one people, don't point to a flag. Point to the code carried in every cell of their being. A code unbroken. A code unforgotten. There are populations shaped by movement, and then there are those shaped by staying. The Kurdish genome tells a story not of flight, but of endurance. Not of conquest, but of quiet survival. In the harsh terrain of the Zagros and Taurus, where winter bites deep and empire after empire passed like storms, the Kurdish people held on, and their DNA bears witness to a lineage tempered by time itself. Among the many Y-chromosomal markers found in Kurdish men, none speaks more powerfully of this resilience than haplogroup J2A. It is not merely present, it is dominant. And its presence doesn't whisper, it declares. This is a lineage that began with the builders of the first cities, the sowers of the first fields, the humans who turned mud and grain into civilization. J2A is not new. It is ancient. Its echoes stretch back to the Neolithic farmers of the Fertile Crescent, who domesticated wheat and invented permanence. But among the Kurds, this lineage didn't fade into the background. It survived every cultural upheaval, retained its genetic integrity through centuries of invasions, and today remains one of the strongest ancestral threads in the region. Yet this is only the beginning. The Kurdish genome also harbors E1b1b, a haplogroup tied to early pastoralist expansions from North Africa into the Levant. And while E1b1b became scattered across the Mediterranean world, within Kurdish populations, it found a haven. Its frequency speaks to a deep-rooted pastoral legacy, one that thrived in the highland terrain where settled agriculture was never the only way to live. R1a and R1b appear as well, often associated with Indo-European expansions. But among Kurds, they don't show the signs of recent migration. Their distribution and variation suggest an early integration, likely from ancient Eastern steppe lineages that blended into the regional fabric long before recorded history. These were not foreign bodies. They became part of the Kurdish genomic identity. Then there's G2A, most commonly linked with the Caucasus, and the early spread of farming into Europe. In the Kurdish context, G2A seems to echo a period when highland cultures acted as bridges between north and south, east and west, carrying not just goods and tools, but DNA. These haplogroups together form not a patchwork, but a tapestry, one woven through centuries of adaptation. Each one marks a different story of origin, but their convergence in Kurdish populations tells us something rare. This is not the result of random mixture. It is the outcome of complex, generational integration. Each migration left a trace, but none erased the past. The result is a genetic architecture that is uniquely stable, not because it never changed, but because it absorbed change without losing its core. Kurdish DNA is not a frozen relic of the past. It is a dynamic system, shaped by hardship and adaptation, yet anchored by continuity. It bends, but it does not break. Consider the Sorani Kurds, In a single population sample, their haplogroup diversity reflected layers of history, stacked like geological strata. One lineage points to the Mesolithic, another to Bronze Age tribal expansions, another to medieval trade, and all of them persist side by side in a single genetic snapshot of a people. Most populations, under pressure from war, colonization, or globalization, lose this depth. Genetic bottlenecks, displacement, forced assimilation, these events flatten the complexity. But among the Kurds, complexity endures. The data is not just wide, it's deep. This depth explains why Kurdish genetics remain distinct despite centuries of proximity to powerful neighbors. Arab, Turkish, Persian. These cultures pressed in from every side. Yet the Kurdish genome remains unmistakable. It speaks of resistance, not rebellion. Persistence, not isolation. The most striking aspect of all is that this genetic resilience mirrors cultural resilience. Just as Kurdish tribes retain their dialects and traditions across fractured terrain, their DNA retained its ancestral composition. Biology and culture, in this case, move in rhythm, preserving identity not through separation, but through memory. Every mutation, every variant, every inherited sequence is a footnote in a story too vast for any single document. But when scientists read the Kurdish genome, what they find isn't just data. They find evidence of a people who withstood history, not by avoiding it, but by absorbing it and staying rooted.